Your body is the key to the real world. There is a lot being said online about leaving the matrix, taking the red pill, or otherwise escaping the system. Some talk about how you need to make money to free yourself from labor and gain access to the luxuries you desire. Others are giving out red pills about female nature or attempting to teach you some other forbidden knowledge. And much of that is certainly useful. However, in this video, the only thing I'll try to persuade you of is that you can find all the knowledge you need inside of yourself if you look carefully. There is more wisdom in your body than in your deepest philosophy. Ever since Decart, we have separated the mind and the body. Decart inherited the tendency to separate them from Christianity, which has always understood man as two parts: the condemnable, sinful body, a part of this fallen world, and the noble, immortal soul, which can be saved from sin, a part of another, better world, the kingdom of God. Even before Christianity, Plato, with his theory of forms and the soul, has already tried to take the focus away from the body, a representative of the physical reality, and towards the ethereal other worlds. But this long tradition of separating mind and body and denigrating the body is a terrible mistake done by humanity, because the mind leads us to a dead end where all truth and knowledge is impossible, and where we either have to surrender to a life-denying rejection of this world in the form of asceticism, Christian or otherwise, or if we are unable to do that, succumb to a postmodern nihilism. The only other possibility to get out of this dead end is the body. That's the only path that makes truth possible once again. To better understand how the mind leads to a dead end and how the body can get us out of it, we must begin with Kant. Kantian postmodernism. In the year 1781, Immanuel Kant published the Critique of Pure Reason, setting off a complete revolution in philosophy and preparing the path for figures such as Schopenhauer and Nietzsche. The Critique of Pure Reason is a work of metaphysics, the study of knowledge and the process of acquiring it. As implied by the title, in the book Kant sets out to find the limits of reason, but also of all human knowledge. In this pursuit, he criticizes both dominant schools of thought at the time: the rationalists, who believe all reliable and true knowledge is based on rationality and is derived through reason and logic, and the empiricists, who believe that all knowledge is based on experience and is derived through the senses. To dispense with the rationalists, Kant argues there are some concepts which cannot be proven empirically or rationally, but have to be accepted on faith in order for rational thought to be possible. Among these, Kant names free will, God, and the soul. To the empiricists, Kant presents two arguments. First, the idea of synthetic a priori judgments. Essentially, these are the schemas which we use to organize and synthesize the information obtained through our senses. These then have to necessarily precede the sensory information and thus fall outside of it. We could understand these synthetic a priori judgments as the instincts and building plans for the body and the sensory organs themselves, passed to us through our genes. And second, Kant proposes his theory of transcendental idealism, the theory that Schopenhauer called Kant's greatest accomplishment. We tend to believe our perception of the world reflects how the world really is outside of us. When we see a tree, we think the tree is actually there in the way we see it. We can also touch it and hear the wind blowing through its leaves. This solidifies our understanding that what we call a tree is actually objectively there in reality. However, the problem is your knowledge of the tree was mediated first by your eyes, ears, and skin, and then also by how your brain interpreted the signals sent to it from the sensory organs. Kant claims space, time, and causality are the features of the human mind and not the outside world. Constructs like these are useful in interpreting reality, but are not features of it. What you call the tree is just what your mind created applying the lenses of space, time, and causality to the imperfect information given to it by your sensory organs. Interestingly, here, Kant seems to predict 150 years before its conception the Copenhagen interpretation of quantum mechanics, which states that by the act of observation you inevitably alter the nature of the object, and therefore it is impossible to have precise information about the object as such, independent of the observer. Also, it might interest you that contrary to the popular belief that hallucinogens increase brain activity, recent imaging studies have shown that under the influence of hallucinogens, brain activity actually decreases. It is possible that the psychedelic states associated with these substances could be caused by the decreased ability of the brain to produce the so-called reality as we know it, seemingly supporting the Kantian view. Although it wasn't his intention, Kant left us philosophically stranded in the postmodern prison of our own mind, unable to interact with reality and thus unable to know any truths about the world. Schopenhauer's Great Escape. After Kant's work was finished, Western philosophy was shaken to the core, left in a state of paralysis. However, there would come onto the scene another German philosopher, young, ambitious, and determined to continue where Kant had left off, Arthur Schopenhauer. He believed there was a way out of the prison that Kant had constructed, a way to interact with reality unmediated, to perceive it as it really is. But how could this be possible? Kant's arguments seem solid. In his work, The World as Will and Representation, Schopenhauer proposes the following split. There is the world of our minds, the world as representation, in which everything we would normally consider reality exists. All the trees, cars, chairs, animals, and other people we have ever interacted with in any way fall into this category. And then there is the world outside of our mind, the world as will. This is what reality actually, objectively is. Normally, the world as representation and the world as will cannot interact with each other. However, Schopenhauer discovered a single point of contact, a narrow door to the truth, the body. The body is experienceable to us as a representation created by our mind, the same way as the representation of a tree is, but unlike a tree, which is always external to us and thus inaccessible, our body is a part of us, intrinsically connected to our mind, and so it is possible to experience not just as representation, but to a much greater degree than anything else, as what it really is, as will. This is the key to Kant's prison of the mind, our body. Schopenhauer's discovery made the truth of the world accessible once again. He had correctly identified the body as the narrow door to the truth, but when he, through this door, discovered the nature of the world, it terrified him and sent him down the path of his famous pessimism. A man is never happy, but spends his whole life in striving after something that he thinks will make him so. He seldom attains his goal, and when he does, it is only to be disappointed. Through the body, Schopenhauer discovered a primal force behind reality that drives all of existence, the will. Schopenhauer argues the will is a fundamental aspect of reality and everything in it, from human beings through animals and plants to even inanimate objects. An exact explanation of the will is beyond the scope of this video. I might discuss it another time. For now, we just need to know that Schopenhauer very much disliked that the nature of the world was will. He claimed that existence itself is a mistake because of it. He believed the will could only lead to suffering and dissatisfaction with life. The will is the cause of our desires in life, and desire leads to suffering. Desires are often impossible to fulfill, but what's worse, even if they are fulfilled, they are immediately replaced by other desires without offering us the satisfaction we had imagined they'd bring. This inescapable pain of life is then exacerbated further by our consciousness, which tends to dwell on regrets over the past and fears of the future. Schopenhauer was the first who realized that the world is will, and this caused him to condemn it. But to understand the real implications of Schopenhauer's discovery, we have to move beyond him. Nietzsche's redemption of the body. Schopenhauer's narrow door to the truth had allowed him to overcome Kant, but he couldn't handle the reality of this discovery without losing his love of life. However, one student of Schopenhauer's philosophy didn't accept that reality was worthy of condemnation. He thought that condemnation and resentment of this world was the legacy of Christianity, not an objective fact, but a sickness of the mind. I consist of body and soul, in the words of a child, and why shouldn't we speak like children? But the enlightened, the knowledgeable would say, I am body through and through, nothing more, and the soul is just a word for something on the body. At first, we might find this quote reductionist. It might feel like it's taking something away from us by reducing us to merely our body and claiming this is an enlightened, knowledgeable position. But the framing of it as merely our body betrays the hidden Christianity in our thinking. Nietzsche wouldn't ever say we are merely body. When he states, "I am body through and through," he says this with pride and veneration of that fact. For him, the body can't be described as merely body, but rather ought to be described as the body. The philosophy of Friedrich Nietzsche in its entirety could be understood as an intellectual and poetical redemption of the body. In his philosophy, it takes the center stage. Friedrich Nietzsche arrived through his study of Schopenhauer, the ancient Greeks, and his own genius at a positive, yes-saying view of reality. He recast the will as a positive force worthy of love and allowed us to regain trust in the wisdom of our body and listen to what it tells us. We are the body. In today's society, we are extremely disconnected from our bodies. Even the way we speak about it is as though it was something external and not a part of us. We distinguish between our body and our mind. We consider our mind to be the thing that makes up majority of what we are and contains the superior aspects of being. Our body, then, is to us the inferior outer shell, and the only value it has to us is as a physical medium for the mind. The way we think about the body is the same as the way we think about a car. That is, as a vehicle for our mind, a tool that helps us, by which we mean our mind, to move around and accomplish things like picking something up from the ground or making us a coffee in the morning. But right there we arrive at a problem. Why would our mind, a superior, independent driver of the body, need a cup of bean water in the morning to wake up? The reason is because it isn't actually independent, superior, or even the driver. The body and the mind are actually inseparable. The mind is a part of the body. Not only do the hormones and other variables in our body certainly have an impact on our thinking, but also we can clearly see that mind and body are one thing if we look at, for example, how Google was able to read what people were saying to themselves in their mind. And the way they were able to do this was by putting a mask equipped with electrodes around the person's throat, neck, and mouth, and measuring the activation in the muscles that you use to speak. This is because the way we speak to ourselves in our mind is by using the same muscles we use for normal speech, only at a very low intensity. Other examples would be when you imagine lifting your arm. The way that you actually do that is by stimulating the same muscles that you would use if you were actually to lift it, only again at a lower intensity. Or when you try to visualize walking around your house and turning a corner that you know very well there, but at the same time you try to keep your head from moving and your eyes fixated on one spot, you will find you can't imagine turning that corner, because the way we imagine it is by actually moving our eyes and head as if we were really there. We tend to think we only use our brain to make decisions, but our nervous system is also in large part contained in the spinal cord and throughout the rest of the body. And it isn't only the wiring connecting our brain to our muscles. It is also actual decision-making neurons as well. When you put your hand on a hot stove and then you instinctively retract it, you do it much faster than if the information had to travel all the way to your brain, meaning it isn't processed there. It is your body that makes the decision to retract your hand. The key to the real world. It is a fact we are our bodies, and we tend to disregard this fact almost completely today. Instead, we lead our lives according to ideologies and delusional theoretical constructs detached from our body, and thus also from reality by multiple degrees of separation. We encounter all kinds of propaganda constructed by someone else attempting to enslave us every single day. It is no wonder we are facing such dire psychological and physical problems in today's society. Depression, anxiety, and stress are particularly among young people on unprecedented levels. Addiction to pornography among young men has become almost universal. Obesity is on a perpetual rise, and birth rates are plummeting across the world. All of these problems and many, many more could be fixed if we listened less to ideology and more to the body, because your body is the key to reality, and reality is the antidote to delusion. Destroy your delusions. That's how you can escape the system.